Geralt of Rivia was untouchable, a mutant built in a mountain keep to kill the things that hunt men, sharpened for 100 years while the North paid him in silver and spat at his back. But what if he'd faced someone who never needed a sword at all? One teacher, one student, only one of them can step out of the world entirely. Let's dive into what would really happen if Geralt ever found himself going head-to-head with the girl he raised. And even though Ciri might sound like Thanos on paper, there is exactly one version of this fight where Geralt walks away alive. We'll get to it later. And it changes how the whole matchup reads, because everything that makes him dangerous was done to him by somebody else. Geralt was handed over to the Witchers by his own mother before he was old enough to remember her face, and delivered to a keep in the mountains run by men who had already buried most of their students. What they did there was engineer a person. The Trial of the Grasses killed most boys who took it, and Geralt lived, so they ran the additional experiments on him, the ones nobody else survived. And that's where the white hair comes from. What came out the other side wasn't really a man anymore. His reflexes work on a timescale that a human nervous system can't reach. His eyes see in the dark. His blood processes toxins that would put a horse on the floor, and he ages at a fraction of the normal rate. But the mutations are the smaller half of what Kaer Morhen did to him. They trained the family out of him, and the fear and the expectation of a future, because in their experience, all three of those things get Witchers killed. They built a man with nothing to lose, because a man with nothing to lose survives contracts. And the first time the world sees what they made is Blaviken. Geralt walks into a market square and kills Renfri and every one of her men in the time it takes a crowd to gather. He is certain he just prevented a massacre. The town is certain it just watched one. They stone him out of the streets, and they give him the name he carries for the rest of his life. That's the pattern, and it never breaks. But to understand why it never breaks, you need to see how the man actually works. A contract goes up on a board. He takes it, and before he goes anywhere near the thing, he analyzes it. He works out the species from the state of the bodies and the marks on the ground. Then he picks the oil, the potions, and the signs that work against the thing he is fighting. After cutting the head or the heart off for proof, he rides back to collect less coin than he was promised from men who spit on the ground when he leaves. That system has worked effectively on everything in that world for over a century. But it also has two holes in it, and both of them matter later. The first is that every single step assumes somebody already wrote the monster down. Geralt doesn't improvise. He identifies. If you take the bestiary away, the whole procedure has nothing to stand on. The second is the potions. Swallow, Thunderbolt, Cat, Black Blood. They make him faster and harder to kill, and every one of them is poison. Each one is a timer counting down inside his own body, and if a fight runs long enough, the potions finish him before his opponent does. Now, his ceiling is genuinely high, and people should know that. At Stygia Castle, at the end of Lady of the Lake, Geralt kills Vilgefortz of Roggeveen, who was arguably the most dangerous sorcerer alive at that point in the story, and he does it with a sword. But there's a second Vilgefortz fight, and nobody arguing for Geralt ever brings it up. Thaned Island in Time of Contempt. Geralt, at his physical peak, walks into a sorcerer's and gets taken apart. He leaves that fight with a shattered arm and a shattered leg, except he doesn't leave it. He gets carried out, and Vilgefortz barely exerts himself doing it. He stands over him and explains, calmly, exactly what Geralt is, a man with a sword. But the real tell is how it actually ends for him. Geralt doesn't die to a monster, not to the Wild Hunt, not to a mage, not to anything his entire life was built around killing. He dies in a riot in Rivia, in a pogrom over nothing, run through by a peasant holding a pitchfork. The finest swordsman in the northern kingdoms was killed by a farmer with a farm tool in a crowd. So his ceiling isn't beating a sorcerer. It's beating a sorcerer under perfect conditions, with preparation, with poison in his veins, at the end of a war that had already worn the man down. And his floor is a pitchfork. Remember all of that, because half of the only path he has to winning this fight is buried in it. So here's the shortest version of this entire matchup. Geralt was made, but Ciri was born. And this is where people go wrong, because they picture Ciri as a magic user who got lucky. She was raised at Kaer Morhen by Witchers. Vesemir, Lambert, Eskel, Cohen, and Geralt himself put her through the same combat pedagogy they'd been running on Witchers for 2 centuries. She didn't take the mutations because Triss shut down the herbs before it went that far. But everything above the mutations, the footwork, the pirouette, the reading of an opponent, she has all of it. Therefore, she's already a trained swordswoman before magic enters the conversation. But that's when Yennefer got hold of her. At the Temple of Melitele, Yennefer taught her to actually use what was in her blood instead of fumbling with it. So, by her late teens, Ciri is a Witcher-trained fighter carrying a sorceress's education, and that combination doesn't exist anywhere else in that world. But training isn't killing, and that's the real question. Can she actually do it? Ciri was riding with a gang of young outlaws called the Rats when somebody put a price on all of them, and the man who took that contract hunted people the way Geralt hunted monsters. Leo Bonhart wore 3 Witcher medallions around his neck. He didn't buy them and he didn't find them. He killed 3 Witchers and took them off their bodies, and he told Ciri about it while she was sitting in his cart in a collar. Bonhart wiped out the Rats by himself. He beat Ciri, took her, suppressed her, and broke her down piece by piece over months. He beat her twice. And at Stygia Castle, she kills him. She doesn't do it with a power surge or by accident. She goes back at the man who collected Witchers and puts him in the ground, using the footwork Kaer Morhen drilled into her to turn his own weight and reach against him. So, before we get anywhere near Elder Blood, Ciri has already killed a Geralt-class swordsman who specialized in killing Geralt-class swordsmen. Now, the part he has no category for. Elder Blood, Hen Iker, the Lara Dorn gene, the thing every sorcerer, every elf, and every emperor in that story spent years hunting. It lets her move through space, then through time, and eventually between worlds entirely. She escapes through the Tower of the Swallow into the world of the NL, and by the end of Sapkowski's saga, she has walked into Arthurian Britain and met a knight of the Round Table. She doesn't run from a fight, she leaves the plane on which the fight is happening. And if you want to know how Geralt handles something he can't pin down, canon has already run that experiment 3 separate times. Vilgefortz he couldn't touch, not until somebody else had worn the man down for him. Gaunter O'Dim he could never beat at all. Not once, not with any blade or sign or potion in his kit. And the only way Geralt ever gets out from under that man is by outplaying him inside his own rules. And the White Frost, the thing waiting at the end of everything. Geralt doesn't fight, he can't. He stands at the door while Ciri walks in alone, and she's the one who comes back out. That's the pattern. Every time Geralt meets something outside the bestiary, the answer is somebody else, a trick, or a door he isn't allowed through. There's also a cleaner way to calibrate this gap that has nothing to do with feats at all. Nobody in that story wanted to breed Geralt. Vilgefortz never wanted to strap Geralt to a table and drain him. Avallac'h and the NL didn't build a centuries-long program around Geralt. Emhyr didn't burn Cintra for Geralt. Every faction that understood power spent the entire saga fighting over her, and Geralt was the obstacle standing in the doorway. He was the man they had to get past to reach the actual prize. So the answer is exactly what it looks like. Geralt doesn't have a single tool that interacts with what she is. Every weapon he owns assumes his opponent stays in the room. It isn't close, and honestly, it never was. But that's the boring half of the answer. And if I stopped there, I'd be wasting your time. Because Geralt is not a man who loses cleanly. And I told you at the start, there's one version where he walks away. So let's actually run it. If you strip the powers out, this is a mutant against a very well-trained human being. He's faster than her, stronger than her, tougher than her, and he has roughly a century of live combat she hasn't had. If Ciri agrees to fight him honestly with a blade, she loses, and she probably loses quickly. She knows that, which is why round 1 lasts about 4 seconds. Because she doesn't dodge, she leaves, and there's no Witcher answer to that. Yrden holds a wraith in place, but a wraith is still occupying the world. Ard needs a target standing in the space you're aiming at. His entire discipline was built over 2 centuries to kill things that are physically present, and she stops being physically present whenever she decides to. Therefore, every exchange from here runs the same way. He commits, she's gone, she's behind him, and he burns another half second he doesn't have. So he stops trying to hit her and tries to control her instead. That's the correct instinct, and it doesn't work either. Axii is a low-grade compulsion that fails against trained minds, and this is a woman who held herself together under Bonhart's conditioning and refused Vilgefortz outright. Quen buys him seconds. Igni needs her to hold still, and every one of them assumes she's standing where he left her. and now the fight starts killing him without her doing anything at all. Remember the toxicity, because his power spike has a countdown attached to it and hers doesn't. She can step out of the world, rest, and depending on how well she's controlling it, come back at a different point in time entirely. He is fighting an opponent who gets to choose when the fight resumes. But the worst part for him isn't the powers. She knows every move he's going to make because he's the one who taught her. She's been watching that footwork since she was a child, and he has never fought anything remotely like her because nothing remotely like her exists. So picture how it actually ends. Geralt is on his knees in the dirt with black veins climbing his forearms, and the sword is somewhere behind him because his hand stopped closing around it a while ago. And Ciri is just standing there, not winding up, not finishing it, standing in the same place she has been standing the entire time, close enough to touch him, waiting for him to work out that she never had to move. Now, 4 things are probably going through your head right now, and 3 of them are wrong. Number 1, she can't control her powers. That's true for most of the saga and completely false by the end of it. If we're scaling characters before they finish developing, then Geralt is a hungover monster hunter getting stoned in a Blaviken square, and I don't think that's the conversation you came for. She ends the story as the Lady of Time and Space, so scale her there. Number 2, and this is the one I promised you at the start, Dimeridium. Dimeridium is a metal that smothers magic. If it's pressed against a sorcerer's skin, it cuts them off from the power completely. Leo Bonhart, the bounty hunter who captured Ciri, locked a Dimeridium collar around her neck, and it worked, suppressed the elder blood, and everything switches off. She can't blink, she can't step between worlds, and she can't open a portal. She becomes a skilled, unmutated swordswoman standing in front of the best mutated swordsman in the north, and we already established how round 1 goes. So yes, Geralt has a win condition, and it's a real one, but canon already ran this exact experiment. Bonhart is the only man who ever successfully suppressed her. He had the collar, he had her in a cage, he had months, and he is still the one lying dead on the floor at Stiga. Suppression buys time. It has never once bought a win. And look at what it would cost Geralt. He needs preparation. He needs restraints. He needs an ambush, and he needs her not to see it coming, which means Geralt only beats Ciri by turning it into a trap, sprung on someone who trusts him. That's the whole answer sitting in one sentence. Number 3, Witchers resist magic. They do mildly against signs and cheap curses, and Vilgefortz demonstrated the exact sealing of that resistance on Thanedd, using Geralt's own femur to do it. And number 4, game Ciri is more consistent than book Ciri. But consistency isn't the same as being stronger. Her book feats are bigger, she crosses entire eras, and if anything, CD Projekt Red scaled her down so she'd be playable. What actually settles this isn't a feat at all. Geralt is a man who kills the things that kill men. Ciri's ceiling is a woman around whom a prophecy about the end of the world is built. You can't rank those against each other, and that failure to rank them is the answer. It isn't close because they were never on the same axis. And here's the part I keep coming back to. Geralt knows he spends the entire saga chasing a girl he can't protect from powers he can't fight, held by people he can't beat. He gets crippled for it and humiliated for it, and he goes anyway every single time, knowing he's outclassed. They made him with nothing to lose. Then they handed him a child, and he spent the rest of his life proving they'd built him wrong. He was never the strongest thing in that world. He's the man who kept walking toward the thing that outgrew him because she was his, which is why the fight doesn't matter. Ciri wins, and Geralt would have wanted it that way. Next, I'm breaking down what's actually going on inside Geralt's head, because the man everyone calls emotionless is the most feeling character in the books. The video is on the screen.